Welcome back to Attitude, Effort, Results presented by Teamwork Online. Today's a fun one. If you guys are watching online, obviously you see I have a guest with us. Before I get to our brand new guest, I do want to, I've been doing it the last couple episodes, just really shout out our new team. If you guys have been following social media, we have been absolutely blowing up on social media, people interacting with us with our new social media and marketing coordinators. Again, Kyron Rudolph taking care of all Instagram Reels, posts, and TikToks, and Maddie Moats Carr taking care of LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. If you haven't followed us on there yet, do that. We also have hired a sales individual, Cole Hoffmeyer, who will be taking care of all sales. So if you guys know anybody that would like exposure to thousands of young professionals and college kids, DM us on Instagram or reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. Always happy to have those conversations. We are going to be starting an email list. Again, saying it out loud just really puts it out in the universe. You guys are going to have to hold me accountable. We're going to have Hunter start writing a couple small different sections to make sure that you guys are kept in the month, something along the lines of an Attitude Effort Results monthly. Again, something like that. So send us your emails, send us all your friends' emails. I don't even care if they know about it. Honestly, just send them over. Or you can send them over via Instagram or LinkedIn as well. All right, let's jump into it. The purpose of today's episode is to provide you educational information. This one's going to be great. When you walk into your first role as a professional, it will most likely be entry level. Fair? Regardless of the industry, most people will start in entry level unless you're Caitlin Chrome, then you just start with your dream job. Not all of us are her. However, most are going to start in an entry level. Today, we have one of the sharpest entry-level managers in the sports industry with us, and he's here to talk about leadership. Sam is currently one of the youngest leaders in all of sports and is in a position today to influence young individuals like yourself. We today are going to try to provide you opportunities to grow your careers personally and professionally today. Today's episode will be spoken from the sports industry background, as that's where Sam and I are both from. However, we will cover all topics today that are relevant to everyone, or topics today will be relevant to everybody. Attitude Effort Results helps create and guide the next generation of elite individuals. Sam's one of those elite individuals. So without further ado, Sam Bocken, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Tanner, for having me. Very happy to be on the show and give back to the rising stars of our sports industry here. So I remember talking about our career goals when we were back in school together, and it's exciting to see where we're both taking off today and where we're going to continue to go. So very happy to be here and see the growth of AER. So over a year in already. So it seems wild to be true.
It's absolutely crazy. Just the people reaching out to us and all the shares on Instagram and now the TikTok and LinkedIn's that's starting. It's cool to see it. Again, not really cool to see my face. Sometimes I open up Instagram, I'm like, whoa, hang on, watch out. Didn't need to see my face right away. But the impact that we're having on individuals, and it's because of people like yourself. So let's dive into it. Today, we're going to talk about your background to start, obviously, build credibility for the episode, your leadership style, interview process, how to make yourself stand out in today's world, along with a couple other topics. What everybody does to start an interview, Sam, I personally believe is pretty boring. Hey, tell me about yourself, blah, blah, blah. I like to be a little bit different. So I reached out to, I didn't tell you this beforehand. We prepped beforehand, but I didn't tell you this. And so we're going to start a little bit out of the gate like this. I reached out to a former manager of yours, one that I trust very, very much. And I asked why. Sam, why are you one of the best leaders in sports right now? So I'm going to ask you to brag on yourself to start this episode. Tell me why you are one of the best leaders out there right now, and then I'm going to share what one of your former managers told me.
Put me on the spot there. I like it. So what I will say about myself, and I'm not really one to brag about myself in any means, but I was able to rise very quickly in the sports industry and be where I am today and do what I'm most passionate about is giving back into the younger generation and helping them get into sports as a career, right? And not just as a job. I've seen success in inside sales as an account executive, and now I've been in this managerial role for about 9-10 months. And it's been an absolute blast. So I think for me specifically, I want to dive into be in the weeds with all my people, right? And importantly, I think good people gravitate towards good people. And one thing that we'll touch into later on the interview process and stuff is to make sure that you have good people that you surround yourself with. And then I follow a lot of the guidelines that AER represents, right? Your attitude and your effort will ultimately equal results, and that's kind of what led me to be here today.
Dang, see, we didn't even prep that, and you already plugging me. I should pay you. I love it. Well, tell me, so I think it's important for everybody to understand where you came from. Obviously, we both went to school at the University of Iowa, but you've done a couple different steps in your career so far. So walk the listeners through kind of your career path and start with some of the important things that you did in college. Again, most of our listeners are young professionals or college kids. So start with what you did there and then take us through a really brief background to how you got to the manager spot now.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet. So, I knew that sports was something that I wanted to get into. And when I went to the University of Iowa, I dove into the sports management major as, without any direction, right? I knew I wanted to get into sports, didn't really know where or how I was going to do that. And so leaned into great professors like Dan Matheson, Packy Moran, Anna Jensen, Alex Voss, so many others that you and I both know. And then ultimately found myself interning with the University of Iowa marketing department, where I eventually got to work with Caitlin Crome, who's a member of AER or an alum, I guess, if we call it that, right? So that was an absolute blast and got to be behind the scenes on what it's like to put on a sporting event. And marketing was something that I loved, but due to that, I could do something a little bit more. And what I loved from marketing was interacting with fans, right? Was the best part of what I got to do there. And then I found out sales. And, from there, all you do is get to talk to people about sports every day and you're interacting with the fan base. And there's nothing better than that, in my opinion. And then I'm basically going through the interview process, trying to reach out to as many different teams as possible. And then COVID hit. And, that was a really tough point for me where, it's tough to hire someone to fill up a stadium when you can't have fans in a stadium. So that was tough. So what I did was try and better myself as much as possible. I went back into grad school, got my master's degree in sports management, and tried to bolster my resume, if you will, as much as possible. Got an opportunity to move out to New York, work with the Mets. Being a kid from a small town in Iowa, New York was a little bit of a culture change, as you can imagine. And luckily for me, I had some amazing people in New York with the Mets that helped me bolster my career. A great inside sales manager in Tyler DeFranco, a great director eventually in Nick Spur as well. And I put my head down and I worked as hard as I possibly could. I sold the most out of anyone in our inside sales class. I was one of 2 people to get promoted there internally to the new business team. Ended up winning the inside sales rep of the year. Then on the new business team, basically another addition to the inside sales role where I'm selling season tickets full time. Then I got to, really bolster my skill set, if you will, right? And now I'm not just calling mom and pops, right? I'm calling businesses, CEOs, right? As well as those consumers, and found a lot of success and, had a lot of great people around me and, was a top performer in the organization, won the new business rep of the year in my first year there. And then I got an opportunity to, manage my own team. Got a call from a mentor of mine in Jake Winowich, who's now our vice president of ticket sales and service over here with the Chicago Fire. Was the group's director at the time. And he wanted to, enhance our inside sales program. And I couldn't think of a better opportunity. So that's kind of what got me here today, and as short and brief as I could possibly sum it up.
I love that. One, I appreciate you giving us some background on how good you were because you're a very humble individual, and there's not a lot of spaces, I believe, that you can brag on yourself, but you deserve that. And I'm proud of you. I've watched, obviously, you throughout the career as we've kind of grown in this industry together, and it is absolutely incredible to see what you've done so far. I'm going to go back to what one of your directors said. I actually reached out to Nick Spur and the New York Mets here this morning, and I said, what makes you the best at what you do and suited for management? And he said 2 things. He said, one, he genuinely cares about the career. I think in the sales industry, not the sports industry specifically, but the sales industry as a whole, people don't genuinely care about the career. They care about the sale. And I think that's a major, major difference between the two. And the second thing that he says is you take care of your day one. You are an exceptional seller. And that's what got you to the place you are today. So some high praise from a former director that you didn't know was coming today. But as you alluded to, taking care of your day one, you didn't even have to go out and really search for this next step, search for this management position. He kind of came to you and said, "Hey, I see how great you're doing. Are you willing to step into this role?" Tell us about what that experience is like, where I talk about you don't even need a resume because you got to reach out to people. When you're as good as you are, people just reach out to you.
Maybe I shouldn't have bragged about myself so much. No, my career path is very unconventional. I thought I was going to graduate and be in the sports world in 2020. So you kind of have an extra attitude towards that on trying to prove yourself, right? And I think people get stuck in career deadlines where they're like, all right, I'm certain years of AE and I need to be at this position. Or in inside sales, if I'm not promoted by 5 months, then I'm giving up, right? And I think as long as you be where your feet are, then everything else kind of takes care of itself, right? And that's kind of what happened with me here. And that was a wild experience to get a phone call from Jake and say, "Hey, I want you to interview." And we had season ticket on sale the very next day, so I couldn't even prep. So basically, as a 25-year-old at the time, I had one day to prep for my first ever managerial interview. Was a challenge, to say the least. But it was a wild experience and one that I wouldn't trade, right? Because I'm someone, and you are as well, where your back's against the wall, like that's where you really prove yourself and find out who you are as a person. And that's kind of what got me here today and helped me propel throughout my career.
I love that. You're in leadership now. Your passion is now to help individuals grow. Obviously, you have numbers to hit on your side, but because you care about your career, you care about people, that's where you're going to focus. Tell me a little bit about your leadership style. I think a lot of people listening are looking for good leaders out there, looking for good managers. Tell us about yours.
Yeah, I think going back to caring, it's a very cliche saying that nobody cares how much you know till they know how much you care.
Mm.
And that's very true, at least that in my point of view, right? Like I want to invest as much as possible in each and every single one of the reps on our team, and try and be hands-on and in the weeds with them, right? If you're not going on appointments with them to show them good process, or if you're not giving them that coaching outside of just one-on-ones, which could happen weekly or bi-weekly, right? Like there shouldn't be a set time to give feedback and coaching to your people. And it's important to know them as individuals, right? And I think what I've been really proud of for all of my inside sales reps is I've gotten good people first. And, that's something that, as long as I stay with this organization in my role, like I will continue to do that, is find amazing people that want to be here, want to excel and grow their career. And, when you have that, everything else is so much easier.
You talk about good people. Tell me how you find those good people.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways. I think it's in the interview process, right? And there's multiple ways to land a job in sports, which we can obviously get onto later. But it's asking, like, when you interview them, right? Are they telling a story about things that they've done to impact others, right? Are they somebody who's a go-getter, right? Are they someone who wants to make an impact, right? Like, they want to work in sports because they work in sports, or they want to, create experiences for people, right? And I think that's kind of where you start. And then as you continue to have these conversations with all these prospective reps, then, you kind of find that as you go along.
You talked about go-getter. You talked about someone who cares about the people themselves. Walk me through from the start. You recruit everybody. There's not a lot of large companies out there, a lot of massive Fortune 500 companies have other companies, recruiting companies that are going and pushing candidates forward. Teamwork Online, what's up? How we doing? Shout out. Companies like that are built solely on bringing people into the industry. Most of what you're doing is hand-to-hand combat. Where are you finding these people? What does that recruiting process look like? Take us there.
There is never such a thing as a tame recruiting process in the sports industry. And, when you get to the inside sales manager level, you realize that a lot of the other inside sales managers around the country, act in the same way that you do, right? And they want to find the top talent. They want to find good people, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the roles that they're in, right? So I think there's a lot of different ways for students to get involved and put their name on the radar of a lot of people. And the easiest way is what we're doing right now, right? Virtual interviews, right? That's just the easiest way to go about it. Whether it be a sales combine that can happen virtually, or as you get in through the interview process, maybe a team will invite you out to one in person, right? Or maybe an in-person interview to go and see the office, right? But there's also a lot of events that I think students are missing out on that they need to attend. Are you going to your university career fair, right? Are you talking to your advisor on how you should get involved in the sports business, whether it's in sales, marketing, it doesn't matter, right? There's great sales events around the country, like the Baylor S3 event that's in Atlanta, but it's also in other cities across the country. Mount Union, sponsored by shout out Teamwork Online, right? There's one in Cleveland and Denver, and there's many others that, students are able to flood the stadium and talk to not just myself, but tens, if not maybe 100 of hiring managers and get in front of them. So, if you have the ability to travel or at least get involved virtually, I highly recommend every student go and ask their advisor, what should I do? This is not a career that you'll find by not being proactive, right? It's not just going to come to you. You have to go out and take it.
How many people call you or reach out and want to have a conversation, say in a 6-month period?
It's tough to put a number on it, but we could put it in triple digits for sure. I'd say probably 100 or so. But I tell you what, the best way to get on any sales manager's radar is not to ask for a job, is to ask for career advice. Yeah. So,
I didn't even set you up for that, and that's the greatest thing that's ever been said on this podcast.
Yeah.
That is so true. Tell me more. Keep me going.
So,
I love that. I just jumped out of my seat. If you guys aren't watching, I literally just jumped out of my seat. Keep going.
Yeah. When I get a LinkedIn DM and someone's asking me, hey, can I just learn about your background? Or, can I just learn how you got your start, right? Immediately I know that this person's invested in sports as a career, right? I know that they're not just wanting something from me. They want to learn, right? They're not just saying, hey, give me this, right? That's something that is an easy way to find out, like, how do you get good people? That's a great way to do it, right? I think some of the practices that you're teaching at AER is great too, on the proactiveness of getting yourself out there. And so when you do these networking calls, and you don't have to be a graduating senior, you could be a junior, you could be a sophomore. Like, I will never forget during COVID, I looked up any inside sales manager I could across the country, and I DM'd them all on LinkedIn, and I put a handwritten note on there asking for advice. I probably got a response back from a third of them, but that third of them was a very large pool. And immediately I'm on these people's radar. So by the time that I am going to graduate, I can start having these conversations with people, and, I'm immediately in the recruiting pipeline. That's an easy way to do it. Ask for career advice. Don't ask for a job.
I love that, because I have people reaching out all the time too, which is, I don't have as many as you. I'm not that cool. But there are people who will come to leaders in the sports industry. And again, if you're not in the sports industry, this goes for most industries out there, where you're just going to go in, click a button to submit a resume, and hope that somebody comes back to you. And even when some people will take the next step and be proactive, which is a positive step in the right direction, they're like, hey, Sam, I'm graduating in 30 days. I'm looking for a job. You're like, who are you? I've never heard of your name before. And now you want me to take time out of my day, value my time. Not saying that we don't, because literally what we both do is try to love and help people as much as we can. But like, you're going to come to us 30 days before getting a job and be like, I don't know anything about the industry. Can I have a job? Dude, come on.
Yeah, it can be aggravating, and I feel for them because they just don't know, right? And that's what we're doing right here, is we're spreading the knowledge, right? And the worst thing that you can do is just put your name in a Teamwork Online application that I may have hundreds of applications, right? Like, everybody has some type of experience in sports or says they're passionate about sports, right? But how do you make yourself stand out outside of what's just on your resume? And the thing you really need to do for anyone listening right now is just get the interview, right? Once you get the interview, you have to sell yourself. That's the beauty of it, right? So,
I love that. Don't tell me any secrets from the Chicago Fire.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, I can't do that, unfortunately.
let's say for a round number, let's say you get 1,000 applications during the interview process. How on earth do you sift through them, and how many are you as the manager actually physically looking at?
I do make a job, a diligent duty to sift through all of them, at least to a little bit of like, all right, I may not click on this person's profile, but I do want to make sure that I'm looking at everybody's name on there. But if it can be bland at times, right? And how do you make yourself stand out is by doing those things, right? So it's tough for me to put a number on it, but I would say, you know, 10% are ones that get set up for interviews if you're getting, in the door. And that's not just for me. That's for, every other sports team in the country. Like I work in the MLS, which is not as popular a league as the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, or the MLB. And, I know that for sure. So if I'm telling you this, imagine what it's like for those other managers in those other leagues.
Yeah, I think it's crazy where people just are like, "Yep, I submitted. I don't know how I got it. I don't know why I didn't get a call back." Come on, dude,
Yeah.
do a little bit of work. Especially in the sales, like our job is to prospect new businesses, to cold call in some capacities fans or new businesses. And so if you can start the process early and show a manager that, hey, I'm willing to cold outreach, start a conversation, build a relationship, I mean, why would you not at least have the conversation? So I
Yeah.
love that. Good stuff. Let's go into best and worst practices for our listeners. As much as you can, I want
Yeah.
to hear the best interview story and the worst interview story. I can tell you a worst interview story because I'm not in a management position for a professional sports team yet. Uh, tell us the worst interview story that you can that you can. I want to make sure you say it. Have a
I'll
job.
summarize it briefly. Essentially, it was supposed to be 30 minutes and it took 10 minutes. And this individual didn't really listen to what I had to say, or kind of gave really short answers to the questions. And then the biggest pet peeve is not having questions to ask, or having
Hmm.
questions of just, all right, tell me what the salary is like, right? And when you get people like that, it's like, all right, I know that you're not into this as a career, you're into this as a job. And I think in the sports industry, there's a very common saying, job or career, right? And then the best, are people who dress to impress, right? I think wearing a tie is something that's been lost. Like when I was in college, like when we were in college, I wore a tie to every single virtual interview that I had, right? I hate wearing ties. Don't get me wrong. I'm wearing a suit right now, obviously, which is kind of ironic, but, and there's three things that people can do to stand themselves out, right? And this doesn't matter when you're looking for a job, when you have an inside sales role, when you're an AE, when you're a manager. You have to be coachable, you have to have a positive attitude, and you have to have a good work ethic, right? And have you ever talked to somebody that said that, oh yeah, I'm not a hard worker, right? Like everybody's going to say they're a hard worker, but how do you prove that, right? And I think the best interviewees, I guess, are people who tell a story about that and can elaborate on that a lot as well. I think follow-ups is something that's extremely underrated, whether it
Mm.
be an email. I mean, a handwritten note is just absolutely standing out, right? Even if it wasn't the best interview of all time, if you write me a handwritten note, I'm immediately going to be like, all right, like, you're on somebody's radar, right? And that is something that, I heavily, heavily encourage anyone looking for a job to do. And then, like I said, outreach on LinkedIn and looking for career advice and not a job is something that's important too. So, but the worst interview, you know, you want to say why you're a fit for the role itself, right? The worst thing you can do is say, yeah, I just really like sports, or I'm a huge Chicago Fire fan, right? Like, that doesn't give any hiring manager any leverage, right? Like, you're getting hired to, for at least if I'm interviewing you, to sell tickets, right? You're not just getting hired to work for a soccer team, So like, how can and how can you show off yourself, right? And having impactful questions is so important, like outside of just the day to day, and what the compensation is, which are good questions to ask. This is not me saying don't ask what the salary is or don't ask what you do on a day-to-day basis, but like talk to me about your leadership style, right? Or talk to me about, how you promote internal growth within your organization, right? If you're in an entry-level role and you don't know if you're going to have an opportunity to grow internally, like you're doing yourself a disservice, So, and where you start is so important for anyone's career.
Walk me through the most ideal interview candidate. Like you from day one, you get a, I don't know, I'll let you go. Walk me through the most ideal process that a young individual, a college kid, a young professional can do to perfectly execute an interview with you.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter if it's virtual round, if I meet you at an event, career fair, if you come in person to an office, those three attributes, right? Coachability, work ethic, positive attitude. You have to display those, right? When someone says, oh, how can you handle adversity? And you go pretty well, like that's not exactly like, what we're looking for. Tell a story about that, right? Like, when I was in school, I did this, or when I was an athlete, I did this, right? And that way the hiring manager can think in their mind, like, all right, this person actually knows what they're talking about, and they're not just saying things just to say them, right? Like, you got to show your why, so to speak. And that's so important. Obviously dressing to impress and making a good impression is really huge too. And it doesn't matter how you get the interview, as long as you're there, and the first impression is everything.
I'm visualizing somebody going like, hey, like, how do you handle adversity? Like, yeah, okay. Like, okay, let's say you get this job. Like, how good are you going to be at this job? And you're like, I'll be all right.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Like, oh, well, I think we'll do really well. And you're like, okay, how? And yeah, you elaborating is super important. You don't want to give one sentence answers to questions. You also don't want to, it's a mixed balance too, because you don't want to go off on a tangent, right? So being able to have stories like, how you handle adversity, or, how social you are, right? If you're in sales and you don't like talking to people, sales probably isn't for you, right? Like, that's just the reality of it, So why are you a fit for that role, and not why do you want to work in sports or why you want to work for a team?
I absolutely love that. You keep alluding to the word stories. It's said a lot in our industry. Facts will sell, or facts will tell. Sorry, I just screwed that up.
You're good.
Facts will tell, stories will sell, right? How can I create a moment, a memory, a feeling, an emotion when I'm selling you something? If I'm going to go in, if I'm going to say, hey, you should buy this product from me, I'm going to come in and I'm going to make you feel like you are in the space. I need you to smell all the smells. I need you to taste the liquor that you're about to be drinking. I need you to taste the food you're about to be eating, right? I need you to feel the energy, feel the atmosphere. Who's next to you? I need to visually put people next to you, because they will create an emotion and a feeling. And that's what you're telling us right now that people need to be doing in an interview process. Like, put yourself in that room, be able to give a full story. Who are you? Why should you be here? And how, at the end of the day, how are you as a candidate going to produce revenue in a sales position? As a coach, how are you going to produce wins, right? As an artist, how are you going to produce great art? How are you going to help the manager out there? Because at the end of the day, there are numbers that have to be hit. And so you as a manager do have to be thinking about that in the back end. Like, is this person just going to take up a spot on my roster, or is he or she going to produce because I got goals to hit too? Not a selfish reason. That's just what we do. We're in a revenue generating business.
Yeah. And I think the stories, it doesn't have to be something that you did in college or high school, right? It could be something in your childhood, right? Like, so don't think really in depth on, oh, I need to have this story written out. And it should be authentic to you, right? Like, people are able to tell if, you're lying. You never want to lie in an interview. That's the worst thing that you could possibly do. But just be yourself, because if you're not being yourself in that interview process, and you're being somebody you're not, and then you get there and then you are starting to be yourself, like, you may not actually like that hiring manager. You may not actually like the people that you're being around. You may not like the role itself, right? So while you should always, tell stories, facts tell, stories sell. I think I got that right. You got to be authentic to you.
This question is for me. When I got into the industry, all I wanted to do was be in your shoes. Like that's truthful. All I wanted to do was be an inside sales manager. I thought if I could get to an inside sales manager role, I'd have the world at my fingertips. Now I'm actually in a spot, and I've said this before, my management knows it, so I feel comfortable saying it here. I'm not positive that management is the next step because attitude effort results is filling my cup because I get to help people with attitude effort results. My question for you, and again, it's selfishly, like, what about management did you just absolutely think you were going to love when you were a kid or when you were in the industry? And has it turned out to be as good as you thought it would be?
So that comes from where I grew up and in my childhood. So my dad started in the hotel business at a very young age. He used to work 24-hour shifts. He used to tell me, at least as a janitor, and he got to the position where he worked himself up to now oversee the hotel that he runs. Right. So a lot of what I learned on managing people is through him, and a lot of the caring part is probably from my mother. So I'll have to give a shout out to her as well. So, but the best part about what I get to do is give people an opportunity to work in sports and change people's lives and impact their career. The most fulfilling thing is when you give proper coaching and feedback and you get into the weeds with your reps and you see them have a lot of success and then they get promoted to that full-time role and then they tell you thank you. Like that obviously may sound selfish for me, but impacting others is arguably a more gratifying feeling than helping yourself. And I'm sure that's one of the main reasons why you're sticking with AER and it is where it is today. And that's where it's at, and then you get to a manager role, like an inside sales manager role. Like when I was an AE, I wanted to be in this position. And then you realize like, oh, wow, I really haven't made it yet. Right. Like, there's never a point to where you're like, all right, I'm good. Like, oh, I've made it here. Right. And like, there's always another level. Right. And there's a different level of competition, right? Whether you're in inside sales, you're competing with your class. When you're in AE, you're competing with people on your floor. And then when you're in management, you're competing against everybody else across the country. Right. So like it gets even more stacked on top of it for levels. But getting an opportunity to impact people's careers is the best part of what I get to do.
You're almost what you just said, moving the goalposts a little
Yeah.
bit, and you're growing and you're expanding as an individual, as a personal, as a professional. I had somebody the other day, I don't exactly know who said it, but he was like, "Hey, like, what's your final goal, right? Like, what's your final goal?" I'm like, I don't have one. Like, I truthfully don't have one. I absolutely love where I'm at. I'm going to be where my feet are, alluding to what you said at the beginning of the episode. I'm going to be where my feet are. I'm going to try to impact as many people as possible. And we'll just see where this thing goes, whether that's with attitude effort results, whether that's with the Suns where I'm at right now, whether that's in my marriage now. Like, there is no end goal. There's no time at the end where I'm going to sit at the bottom of the rainbow and just put my feet up. Like, I just don't, I can't live like that, dude. My grandpa's still working. He's been retired. He's a farmer. They never retire. He's been retired forever. So you just got to keep moving the goalposts a little bit. Tell me one more thing that is absolutely phenomenal about leadership that you did not know you were going to love walking into it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the strategy side of things and how to manage a campaign, right? Or how to provide coaching for things that you may not have experience with, right? Like I was a season membership seller, right? Like I sold season tickets and now I have to learn about the groups world, right? And how do I give proper coaching to my reps when my main job was not to sell groups, right? Like as a perfect example. So I think it's being even more full menu than you have to be because when your reps come to you, like you have to give that good advice. You have to be ready to go. Otherwise, they're going to start not believing in you. So that is one thing that I didn't think that I would enjoy, but I actually do a lot.
I love that. I love that. Well, we are closing in. I can't believe it's been 35 minutes already. This is
Oh,
nuts.
wow.
This has absolutely flown by. I'm going to leave you to give our individuals, I think it's a very cliche ending to it, but tips and tricks, steps, actionable steps. I really enjoy actionable steps. I'm in college, right? I'm in college. I'm a young professional. I want to get into the sports industry, or I want to grow into management, into leadership one day. It doesn't even have to be the sports industry. There's a lot of listeners here that are not sports specific. what can I be doing right now, actionable? I can end this podcast and I can go right now and do these one or two things. What are those from Sam Bocken?
So I'll start with college first. And I think we alluded to it a lot earlier is, being proactive on LinkedIn, right? Being genuinely curious about someone's background and their career. And, that will inevitably put you in a position to get on somebody's radar, right? I think going to those events is so important, whether it be the Teamwork Online events or, the National Collegiate Sales Competition is so important, right? If you're able to do that. And going to your advisors and asking for feedback on what you should do to get on people's radar. Like, I don't think we utilize our advisors enough. And we were very fortunate at the University of Iowa to have great advisors, and how to stand out quickly when you're in sales. Like when you have the role, leadership's not a title. It's a combination of actions, like just because I'm a manager doesn't make me a leader. Right. So what I always said was when leadership isn't around, who do people go to for advice, right? That's who a leader on the sales floor is, right? That doesn't mean you have to do what a manager does and proactively listen to calls and, try and do one-on-ones with people. But, are you doing the job as effectively as you possibly can? And once you are, people will naturally gravitate towards you, being a good person, right? I think going back to coachability, positive attitude, having an amazing work ethic, seeking advice often, not just from your direct report, but from other directors. Like when I was in inside sales, I knew I wanted to be a new biz. I took Nick Sparrow to lunch probably 3 times, and it got to the point where he stopped asking me to take him out to lunch because we have nothing else to talk about. So that was great too. So, you want to make sure that when you're in inside sales that what the other directors or managers of different teams embody, because you want to be able to gravitate towards that leader, or not just because, I like selling season tickets, or I like selling groups, right? And I've never seen the hardest worker not see success in this business, right? If you are the hardest worker on your team and you're not seeing a lot of success right now, I promise if you keep up the consistency and you keep asking for feedback, you will find the results. And getting face-to-face with people is the main thing as well. Are you able to get in front of clients? And lastly is don't have career deadlines. Be where your feet are.
Love that.
Don't think that, because you've been an AE for 2 years, you have to be in management. Otherwise sports isn't for you anymore. There's different timelines for everybody. Our team president started in inside sales and he moved up super fast, right? And then there's other people that are on our leadership team that didn't start out in sports and they're senior directors now, right? So there's so many different avenues for people to get involved. And if you think to yourself, I need to do this by X time, you're only going to deter yourself and mess with your own psyche.
I was going to end it right there, but you said something that triggered me, and I love it so much, so I'm going to go back to it. The career deadline piece, I don't know what it is, but people, individuals, especially early on in their career, again, we can go outside of the sports industry. It doesn't have to be just sports. There's some sort of internal pressure to just keep going. What if you love what you're doing?
Yeah.
What if you're kicking ass and loving what you're doing? Why do we need to keep going?
That's the question, and if you want to get into that leadership role and you want to advance your career, then be proactive as if you were trying to find that job when you were in college, right? But as long as you're being where your feet are and you're trying to be as successful where you're at in that account executive position or in your inside sales role, it will come to you. I didn't apply to be the manager of inside sales for the Chicago
It's crazy.
And I'm very fortunate, and this may sound ironic because I moved up super quick, but, I never thought to myself, if I don't get this manager of inside sales role in a year, then I'm done. I just tried to be as good as what I possibly could be on Nick Spur's team. And then I found myself here and, now, I wouldn't trade where I'm at for any place in the world, and we have an amazing leadership team and great people on our sales floor that, I'm so happy to work with. And, shout out to my current inside sales team as well. I got to give them a shout out since I know they'll be listening to this and probably making
love it.
So.
Well, and I want to take another step back. Like, don't sit in this role that you're at and be complacent. There's a difference between being complacent and just sitting there for 10, 15 years and just being like, oh, like Monday to Friday again. Like, first of all, if you ever want to get in sports, it's never a 9 to 5. Like, that should be the first thing everybody knows about the sports industry. When do we play? When do we have games? When the rest of the world is not at work. So you're never going to have that in the sports industry. But if you're continually growing personally and professionally, there is no internal pressure that needs to be put on you or external pressure that needs to be put on you. Just keep going one step at a time. Keep doing the little things that Sam talked about here today, and you are going to be in a great space. Just because it came to my mind, one last thing is I think it's easier today to be elite in this industry than it ever has been because people are so lazy, because people are not taking your advice, Sam. I truthfully believe that. It is easier today to be elite. And ladies and gentlemen, you just heard from one of the most elite individuals in the sports industry right now. He won't say it, I will. An individual who has started in what I would call probably the most competitive entry-level program in the country in the New York Mets. I will say it again, and I hope my management doesn't get upset at me for it. Probably the best inside sales and leadership development program in the country, where the Mets just absolutely pump out leaders. I had Kenny shared a stat with me, but I don't want to put it on here because he shared it in private. How many leaders the New York Mets pump out? Like you were a shark among sharks. You were not a shark in a pond. And there's a massive difference. So the people listening right now, you just heard from an absolute shark, an absolute killer. Sam, I am so appreciative that you came on today, and this was a lot of fun. It went a lot faster than I thought it was going to.
This was an absolute blast, and now what I get to do is help create a similar inside sales program as what I had in New York. And we've seen a lot of success right now, and we're going to keep going. So if you think that, you're fit for the Chicago Fire, feel free to reach out.
I love it. If you guys, we have somebody who was very heavily involved in Attitude Effort Results and selfishly might have been one of the only reasons they ended up grabbing a role in sports besides obviously all the attributes that they have, but getting to know the sports industry, getting into the industry, going to be working under Sam and be an absolute killer. So I appreciate you, Sam. Again, any closing remarks that you'd like to leave us all with?
Try to work as hard as you possibly can while you're young and believe in the compounding effects of your hard work, and everything else will take care of itself. And last but not least, be a good person. And that's what all sales is about. People buy from who they know, who they like, and who they trust. And as long as you are a good person and you work as hard as you possibly can and you're coachable, it will happen.
Come on. That is awesome. All right, let's inspire others and continue to grow together.